Okay, welcome back to members of 121 Community Church in Grapevine, Texas, in our ongoing study in Moral Laws by Edgar Sheffield Brightman. We're going to take a look at Chapter 4. We're going to take a look at the system of ethics. We're going to take a look at pages 81 to 97, and that will give us the fourth chapter, which contributes to his phenomenology of ethics. Let's take a look at Block 1. We look at normative prescription. Brightman says we must correlate the moral laws that are true. We are to construct a coherent system of laws as prescriptive direction of development through rational critique of desire and by measuring the value behind the brute fact of experience. Normative measure is the critique of reason. It surveys, it orders, it unifies, and it systematizes. And if we look at the fourfold procedure in Note 3, we have the fact that we begin with observation. We observe the experiences of value, obligation, and law. Then we generalize according to likeness and tendency. We eliminate all contradictions, and then we interpret through hypothesis and systematizing the interrelated relationship between IDOS ideals. So the fourfold process of this process of surveying, ordering, unifying, and creating a coherent system. From there, let's look at Block 2 and take a look at the ordering form that this takes. Proof is relational truth, says Brightman. Reason needs relation. Proof equals IDOS truth functioning in relation as a self-contained system. Now, Brightman proposes an ongoing dialectic. So in 2, under structure, system is gradual exposition. It's ongoing dialectic. He does give us his hypothetical system in this chapter. And it is formal laws, axiological laws, and personalistic laws. We begin with formal laws. They are the arrived at prescribed obligatory ideals that we gather at the de Kunta threshold of dialogue with others. We move into the axiological laws from axiao, positing. These are the ideals as posited and directed toward relevant situation in an attempt to direct experience toward the real. And then personalistic laws, that's when the posited abstract ideals are concentrated down to practical wisdom in order to fuel our praxis of going out of the self in praxis. So that's his hypothetical system. And if you notice from previous studies, it reflects his logic of faith. It reflects his logic of faith. You've got formal laws, axiological laws, and personalistic laws. That brings us to the movement of spirit in 3. A movement from abstract formalism to concrete personality takes place. The axiological equals the positive values we seek to embody. The personalistic shows what ought to follow in praxis. It brings in oughtness. Structure and law are related. Formal laws assert the law of autonomy. The self-imposed values are obligatory. Axiological laws assert the law of ideal control, that values must be empirically refined. Personalistic laws assert the law of ideal personality, making values concrete through praxis. All of this leads to dynamic system in Block 3. Prescriptive content and ordering form create the dynamic system. We prescribe a content of the IDOS ideal. We shape it into a form of that hypothetical system of law, and that creates a dynamic system. Now for Brightman, system equals logically connected body of principles. Reason is a principle of growth and development. It's not a static dogmatism, it is dynamic and developing. It is a discerning system, discerning between good and evil. Essential reasonableness becomes the criterion for right conduct. Discernment presupposes the necessity of communal dialogue at Aristotle's De Conta threshold. And through that dialogue, we reach the notion of the true. We transcend dokeo supposition. That's where De Conta comes from, dokeo supposition. We transcend supposition and raise it to eidos aletheia, truth, through dialogue. So under De Conta's system, we gather data for the categories of value and obligation and law with others. It is centered in our phenomenology, so it's interactive with all stages of Brightman's phenomenology. The De Conta threshold is centered in his phenomenology. It's in the center of the phenomenology chart that we've had, and it interrelates with every single stage in Brightman's system. There's always that open door to dialogue within the body of Christ. The dialogue with others is an ongoing, interrelated aspect of every stage of Brightman's system. Gathered data next is systematized and posited as anticipatory moral experience. We posit the system of the gathered eidos ideals that we seek to verify and realize in actuality. So in this lesson, which is, remember, we've already looked at logic, structure. Okay, we've already looked at logic, structure, and data, and now we're looking at system. So logic, structure, data, and system define Brightman's phenomenology. The data is the data gathered at the De Conta threshold, where we gather here the block 1 content, the content that surveys, orders, unifies, and systematizes the eidos ideals we gather through dialogue at the De Conta threshold. So it's a gathered data, but that moves on to the notion of the true and reaching the eidos ideals, where we start to shape those into systems. So we get that data in block 1 as content, we give it form in block 2, and Brightman does give us his hypothesis that it is a form that is the logic of faith. Essentially, it's the logic of faith expressed as ethics. It's the logic of faith expressed as ethics. So it will involve experimental positing of the formal laws, which he calls axiological positing. Then it will involve going out of the self in the desire of ideals, which is praxis, which he calls the personalistic shaping down through practical wisdom. And then we reach interpretive construction. So it gives us an ethical version of the logic of faith. But it all contributes to the law of ideal control. If you look at block 2, note 4b, that assertion of the law of ideal control, that we're seeking to empirically verify and empirically refine that which we posit as ethically true. The logic of faith serves ethics as well for Brightman. And that creates block 3, which this lesson is all about. The third moment, creating a dynamic system. a dynamic system that is ongoing growth and development, ongoing dialectic. We never become fundamentalist, dogmatic, static truth. We are always dynamic truth, unchangeable agape love of the Father, but dynamic growth within the unchangeable agape love of the Father. So yes, the divine is unchanging. The divine is also dynamic. Spirit is dynamic. And we participate in a dynamic dialectic, not static fundamentalism. We do, according to Brightman, participate in the ongoing movement of spirit toward kingdom, toward doxa glory, as Brightman would say, movement toward doxa. And we participate through a logic of faith, which in this case is being explained as a logic of faith that serves ethics by moral laws. And those moral laws are formal, axiological, and personalistic. They are formal, axiological, and personalistic. And from here, we're gonna move on from. This wraps up the 4th chapter. It takes us up through page 97. So after looking at logic and structure and data and system, our next lesson must be a composite look at a phenomenology of ethics. We must gather in this roughly this 100-page phenomenology. That he's given us a 100-page phenomenology, a 97-page phenomenology. All of the data is there for us now, so we need to gather it together into a composite picture before we proceed through the latter 200 pages of the book. First 100 pages give us a complete phenomenology of ethics. Brightman writes phenomenology. He writes personalism, but he writes personalism as phenomenology. He tells us that in every single book. He writes phenomenology. So he's given us all of the information we need in the first 4 chapters. Our next lesson, we'll take a look at compiling in a coherent model, logic, structure, data, and system. Logic, structure, data, and system will be gathered together in a coherent sign model of moral laws and Christian ethics. That wraps up chapter 4. Our next lesson will be the composite model.